But now Pogacar's riding 165. That's it. Everyone's just going on 165.
So
But
talk to me about that. What's going on with this shorter cranks trend? Because for a long time, the prevalent theory was kind of Jan Ulrich and stuff back in the day. Like they were pushing up towards 180 cranks, with the idea being Archimedes, give me a big enough lever and I'll move the world.
yes, exactly. So I have to credit Jim Martin and Dr. Paul Barrett. He was the biomechanist of British cycling when I was there back in 2012 when he did his PhD. That was in look exactly that. Is the lever arm important, relevant into power in cycling? Now it is up to about 30 RPM. All right, so track start, sprint start, things like that. Getting off the line.
Yeah.
But after that, is what we call sub-max cycling. That's what most of us do. Endurance cycling. Crank length isn't relevant. It just changes your gearing. Now, once you know that, the reason why we use that is because on the track in team pursuit, I would say a team pursuit position is probably the most aggressive bike position you can have because the event is less than 4 minutes now. So you can put up with a lot of pain, at the service of power and error. So those positions are so low at the front. The guys were closing their hips up. I had to make them as mobile as I can. And they just couldn't hold. The best position was almost impossible. But because their thighs coming up into their chest, the hips closing, they're losing power, and the hips are rocking. So that's where the first place we did it. We dropped crank length significantly. So like Brad, when I first met Brad, he was on 177s on the road, 165 for Rio on the track, and it works. And that's but the bike industry, as you know, sometimes takes a long time to shift, and part of the reason that is like, if you go and buy it, most of the bike companies as well, their cranks are ordered for the next 2 years. They put their order in and they come. So, but now Pogacar's going. I always remember when Lance was like, everyone was like, oh, he cycles at 100 RPM, and everyone was like, oh, I'm going to run like this. And it's like, I think RPM's the most specific thing to a person. Your optimal one, whatever is the most efficient, is so personal to you.
So what's the data on these cranks? So like I'm trying to think of what's the different metrics at play here. So it's like, how is it affecting torque, cadence, power?
So once you go above a certain RPM and it becomes sub-max cycling, at that point, if you reduce crank length, say you're in one gear, and reduce crank length, your RPM will go up because you'll go around faster. So all you're doing is changing your gear. So to stabilize the RPM back to what it was, you just move into a harder gear. So that's it. So crank length, a crank is part of your gearing system. If you imagine it as 3 circles,
So the benefit of it is obviously you've a bit more clearance if you're railing through corners, but it's mainly an aerodynamic benefit.
Well, in itself, as I believe in the small wind tunnel, like a 5 mil drop does produce a drop in CDA itself, because that's a moving. It's a small amount, but it definitely does. This is where it comes. This is where they're interested, Tom Anthony. If you've got a good bike fitter or someone, what you do is you drop the crank length, you move higher in the saddle because you want to maintain the good saddle position, and forward. You get the hip more over the bottom bracket. That nearly always increases power. Nearly everyone I see, when I drop their crank length, we do it for 2 reasons. One, to get rid of mostly to get rid of pain, so for example, knee pain. You can even solve saddle sores because it decreases your movement on the saddle. But most people will always come back and say either they find they produce more power or they produce the same power for miles more easily. So it's a better position. So if you imagine you've got too long a crank on, you have to almost absorb it on the way back up, at the back end of the stroke. Once you have a smaller crank, you can get up and over the bottom bracket, and that means you're stomping down much more efficiently.
So how much is somebody that's gone from a 172 to a 165, which I guess is becoming the new standard, how much are they raising their saddle height by?
So my method is always, if the saddle height is correct, so first of all, make sure that's great. If the saddle height is correct, what we do is, if they're dropping 7.5 mil, we move the saddle up 7.5 mil, so the knee extension stays the same, but you have to move it forward then, obviously, because the saddle goes backwards, and then get over the back. The skill is, that's what most people will be making the mistake of doing, is dropping the crank length, but then not modifying their saddle height and position to take advantage of it, if that makes sense. There you go.
Yes, that does make sense.
So that's the bit you've got to do afterwards, and it makes sense. And honestly, I've had people come in to me, email me back and say like 20, 30 watts they found, and it's really good for below back pain, because your hip flexor muscle, one part of it, the psoas, inserts upon the lower rib. So really, you know, when you get off the bike and you go for the cafe stop and you're really stiff for the first few
Yeah,
minutes.
I'm actually really bad at that, right in the lower back, kind of
Yeah.
rector
Well,
spinae type area.
Yeah, if you drop your crank left, that's miles easier. I've looked at the British Triathlon's positional process for the last 6 years, so like Brownlee brothers, Alex Yee and all that, and we regularly ride 165 on the road bike because they get off the bike and they run better straight away off it. It's good on the bike, but it's good off the bike as well.
Interesting. And would you go with the same on a gravel bike?
Well, for clearance reasons, it's the same. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then with gravel stuff, you know, you often in those. I mean, it depends. At very, very low RPMs, your crank length does come around. But how often are you going up 1 in 4 stuff? Not very often. So yeah,
not very often.
Regularly, I definitely think it's beneficial. But as I say, I think it's. I hope people don't make the mistake. So if you're on, for example, you're 172.5, so you drop to 165, but don't modify your saddle height, you're sitting too low.
Yeah.
You get a good hip there, but you're sitting too. So my methodology is to raise us out, get the hip clear. You know, as we get older as human beings, remember first and foremost, I'm a physiotherapist. Our hips get stiffer. That's the first thing because when we stood up a couple of million years ago, when we're saying you go in the British Museum, a dinosaur skeleton is very similar to us, you know, and we stood up, but there's evolutionary changes are happening. But we generally, like I said, when the hip gets stiff, when we take people's crank length down, and they're just like, yeah, bloody hell, this is amazing. Mainly for pain and discomfort, you know, getting people over those things and keeping them cycling because cycling is a great sport. You know, there's no eccentric forces in it, so you see plenty of people cycling hard into their 70s. You don't see many people running marathons hard in their 70s, you know, because it's.
I've a lad on my local group rides 84.
Really?
Yeah. Sean Lally's a legend in Irish cycling. The races he's forgotten more about cycling than I know.
He's like the Sean Kelly, is it?
Yeah, no, literally, him and Sean Kelly, there's great pictures of them sprinting against each other back in the day, like. But yeah, he's a legend. But as you're saying that to me, like I'm visualising it, and I'm even seeing Poggy, and I'm seeing like a lot less lateral hip movement, like a more stable position.
Exactly.
Can we measure efficiency levels on that? Because that has cascading effects then into nutrition and all sorts of other areas on the bike.
Yeah. So if you drop crank length, imagine my best, what I used to describe. Imagine you got two ducks on a pond. Yeah, the one with the bigger cranks is like this, trying to stay up, and the one with smaller cranks is like this. So you're absolutely right. If you drop that crank length, what you do is you get less vertical and lateral hip movement, and you stay more solidly in that position. And you're absolutely right. By the first principles of physics, that would then flow through to everything else, wouldn't it? You know, and I don't know whether Pogacar's been riding 165 cranks for long, but I imagine he was because he looks so good on a bike, doesn't he? So still. You think about the efforts God, I saw that interview the other day. What his zone 2 is? What is it? 150 heart rate with 320 watts. I was like, it's just bonkers. I mean, but you think about the efforts he does when he's chipping off the front and doing it all on his own. You know, you can't sit behind anyone. You have to be, solid, as aero as you can. You know, and that lower cranks will definitely facilitate that.
But it almost anatomically changes you on the bike into what we used to say back in the day is how hard was that race? I was on the rivet for the entire race. Well, on the rivet just meant, well, I'm sliding right to the tip of the saddle, and I spent an uncomfortable couple of hours on the tip of the saddle in lineouts. We've just adapted the position so we're there in our most powerful position, but as a default.
Yes, exactly. And do you remember Contador used to slide all the way forward to the front of his time trial bike, and every bike in the world wanted to get it. My theory around that is that I think people are self-optimizing, trying to get to that more powerful position directly over the bottom bracket. But then they get there, and because the crank's too big and more of the saddle height feels too low, then they have to shift backwards to get more comfortable. So I would say, if you want to sit right on the nose of your saddle on the rivet, having a shorter crank is basically for 5 mil, you open up the hip about 3 degrees, which is it's a real. Feels so different, so much easier to hold,
Geez, if we could go back and get big Miguel Indurain off those 188s.
How good can it be? I have to caveat that there is a very small percentage of people where I do drop crank length and they don't like it, around about 3 to 5%. But I've worked out, I think those people are normally on very long cranks and they've got really used to it. And what they do is they almost like get a little bit lazy and they use the crank to close up their ankle, if you know what I mean, and they sort of lean into it.
Yeah.
And then, so you can have all the science in the one, and the science is strong. It doesn't affect crank length, but we all have our preferred movement pathway. If you jump over a box or tennis net, and I do, we'll do it in different ways, and that's why we all pedal differently. We don't really pedal. We walk on bikes. we take walking because that's the back of our brain as well, and then we turn it into pedaling. So everyone pedals slightly different in their own way, and that's why crank length is what I call the volume button on asymmetry as well. So like all human beings are slightly asymmetrical. Cycling is completely symmetrical. So when you get there, if you've got a big crank and you've got one-sided saddle sore or knee pain, often dropping crank length will even you up a little bit, turn the volume down on how much you have to move around, and then boom, a lot better.
How correlated are saddle sores to poor bike fit?
Massively. So I see people come into the clinic and they literally have a bag of 10 saddles. They can be like, nearly 2,000 pounds in there, and they say, which one of these? I go, well, we start with that one on the bike. Why? Because if it's not in the right place, it can't work. So that's first and foremost. So I think the biggest mistake people make with saddle sores is blaming the saddle. It's like, so it can, of course, it can be you've got the wrong width, wrong shape, wrong type. Using a time trial on a road bike, for example. There are some simple things, but my key tips on that are, make sure you got your saddle in the right place, and it's normally a little bit higher, a little bit more further forward. We're a little bit more tilt down than what most people like. I don't know any saddle in the world that's meant to be used nose up, but it's a common thing that you see is people doing that, and it's easy to get over. So yeah.
Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4i's offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter, where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.